Hola, ¿cómo están, my compañeros? I want to look back through the annals of time with eyes to see.
Minimum mandatory sentencing provisions, if we can put more police officers on the streets, if we can build more courts, have more prosecutors, if we will commit ourselves to be as outraged about crime as the people who are victims are outraged, I believe we're going to begin to turn the tide, and I believe this bill is going to be an important part of it. I yield the floor.
Senator's time has expired. Senator from Delaware.
Madam President, I yield myself 3 minutes. Madam President, it's been a real pleasure to work with my friend from Texas. We most times are on opposite sides of issues. This time we're on the same side, but it is, I realize in this business it's difficult for us to, notwithstanding the fact we're personally cooperating on this bill, for us to dismiss the prospect of some partisanship. Let me set the record straight on this bill. The underlying bill, which is now the Biden-Hatch bill, was the Biden bill. A guy named Biden wrote that bill, and he wrote that bill by going down and sitting down with the President of the United States of America, not with his Attorney General, not with anyone else, with Bill Clinton, President of the United States of America, who between the time he got elected in November until the time he was sworn in, called me at my home on 6 separate occasions, and he unfortunately doesn't need a lot of sleep. Sometimes literally, and I say this on the record, as late as 11:30 at night, to discuss why.
You can only imagine some of the cocaine-fueled, crack-fueled conversations that these two gentlemen have had with conversations they've had with each other. Because he says that he's Bill Clinton's friend, and usually birds of a feather, you know, flock together. He said, I didn't talk to his AG, I didn't talk to this person, I talked to the president. That's 2 crackhead buddies hanging out. And they start talking about 100,000 police officers, and I can just imagine that as politicians are like, oh yes, 100,000 police officers, that has a nice ring. Whatever we got to do to get 100,000 police officers.
I wasn't moving quicker on the Biden crime bill from before. I sat with him, not with his Attorney General. He wanted 100,000 policemen. He does not view this as a social issue as opposed to trying to bring peace and security to the streets. As governor of the state of Arkansas, he presided over, as governor, the execution of individuals within the state and the death penalty. He supports the death penalty. He is the fellow who insisted that I bump this up from initially. When I said, where are we going to get the money? He said, well, all I know is I want 100,000 cops. I made that commitment. He had endorsed the Biden crime bill as a candidate when he ran. He is the one who talks about the need for stiffer penalties. So notwithstanding the fact, some of the old Democrats and former presidents who were Democrats before Carter, I suspect, I don't know who we're talking about here, but in the old days, it is true. When Richard Nixon was running for president, Richard Nixon used to talk about law and order, and the Democratic response was law and order with justice, whatever either one of those meant.
Law and order with justice.
I never knew. I was running then in 1972. I didn't think Richard Nixon knew what it meant, and I didn't think the opposition knew what it meant.
He just said that he does not know what the concept of law and order with justice is, and yet he is the leading social justice advocate currently in the 21st century, quote unquote, you know. This gentleman is revealing it. A leopard never loses its spots.
The president is very, very straightforward and simple. He knows there are 2 basic steps here. One step is you must take back the streets. And you take back the streets by more cops, more prisons.
Bill Clinton is the criminal, and he doesn't like competition.
More physical protection for the people. He also understands what my friend from Texas understands, and he doesn't talk a lot about, but he signed on to in this bill. He also understands there's a need to keep people who are first-time offenders, who are nonviolent offenders, or who are potential time offenders who haven't gotten, I yield myself an additional 3 minutes, who in fact are people who are getting themselves into the crime stream for the first time, that they should be diverted from the system. So I hope this crime bill, when it passes, the Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing, I hope that we will have ended
It doesn't
once
seem
and
like
for
that's
all
what he said.
this notion
Why did that act like that?
passes, the Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing. But he signed on to in this bill. He also understands there's a need to keep people who are first-time offenders, who are nonviolent offenders, or who are potential time offenders who haven't gotten, I yield myself an additional 3 minutes, who in fact are people who are getting themselves into the crime stream for the first time, that they should be diverted from the system. So I hope this crime bill, when it passes, the
I thought a
Biden-Hatch
major
crime bill.
thing about his bill is that the first-time offenders and nonviolent offenders were getting fucked over. Pardon my language.
As it becomes law, God willing, I hope that we will have ended once and for all this notion that is a hangover from the 60s, that somehow Democrats are weak on crime and Democratic presidents are weak on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. The truth is, every major crime bill since 1976 that's come out of this Congress, every minor crime bill, has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill, and has had a majority vote of the Democratic members of the United States Senate on the bill. So one of the things I want to do in addition to ending crime is end the political carnage that goes on when we talk about crime. Crime is not Democrat or Republican. Making the streets safe is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is one of those issues I hope this passage of this bill will be taken out of the gridlock category and moved into an emerging consensus. And the consensus is as follows, and I will cease when I finish this statement. The consensus is, A, we must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. The Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the Democratic president of the United States of America, the Democratic attorney general, the Republican leader of this effort, Senator Hatch, the Republican senator from Texas. We all agree on that. Now, we can find some fringe folks in the study groups on the right wing and left wing, libertarians and left-wingers in my party who say, no, that's not what we should do. But politically, that consensus has been arrived at. I acknowledge there was not that consensus in the 60s. There is today. There's a second thing that we all have agreed upon, and that is, unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes,
Bottom 10%
because they literally
combat soldiers.
have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We 3 more minutes. Because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct, but for simple, pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact,
if you can spot it,
in part
you got it,
because
Joe.
of its neglect, created.
You are the predator.
Again, it does not mean
He is
because
the
we
predator.
created them
He
that
is
we
the
somehow
alpha
forgive them
predator.
or do not take them out of society to
He
protect my
is the
family and yours
reptile.
from them.
He
They
is.
are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice
Beyond the
but to
pale
take
means
them
beyond the
out of
fence.
society.
They used to call
And the
fencing.
truth is, we don't very
It's
well know how to
pale.
rehabilitate them
Beyond the
at that
pale. They say
point.
it's beyond,
That's the sad
they're
truth.
beyond hope, beyond all
You're looking
hope.
at the fellow who was one of the primary architects of the Sentencing Commission.
The only person beyond all hope
You know what
is
the basic
you, Joe
premise of the
Biden,
Sentencing
and your
Commission is? I know the
crack-addicted
presiding
son.
officer knows.
Your
It
son
was the
is a
first time in 80
crackhead.
years we rejected
A
the notion
severe crack
that the
cocaine
condition
addict.
of sentencing must be
Can
related
you
to how long it would take to rehabilitate. I'm the guy that said rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it and notice it. And even when we notice it and we know it occurs, we don't know why. So you cannot make rehabilitation a condition for release. That's
Even though his son has been to rehab 9 times.
why in our system, there's the federal system, you serve 85% of your time. I remember
about
when it
your
was going
son?
on, when I was making these arguments in the late 70s, they used to call Biden's same time for the same crime provision.
Okay, baby.
It's a shame, but
Put
we
your
don't
money
know
where
how
your
to
mouth
rehabilitate.
is, Daddy.
But there is a consensus, and I will cease.
Yeah, you're about
must
to be.
make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malfactor in society.
We don't
I don't
care,
care
Joe. We don't
why
care why. We don't
someone
care
is
about your son.
antisocial. I don't care why they become a sociopath. We have an
He doesn't
obligation
care.
to
He has
cordon
no
them off from the
mercy.
rest of society,
He gets
try
no
to help
mercy.
them, try to change their behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail, away from my mother, your husband,
He
our
is the
family.
criminal. Away from his money.
But we would be absolutely stupid as a society
To fall
if
for
we
this?
didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks still exist. And we must deal with that. And I think there's a consensus among Republicans in that. Old barbed wire Republican conservatives just want to hang them high. Even those folks are saying, hey, we got to deal with the root cause of this. Not one or the other, but separately. And liberal Democrats who used to say, let's look at the sociological underpinnings of why this occurred, and we have to, they're now saying, hey, look, we got to take back the streets. We'll make that fight later. So there is a consensus. I hope the remainder of the discussion as we close out the debate in this bill, we can end that old fight. We can put it behind us. Hopefully we have, the senator from West Virginia said this is a historic moment on this bill, a consensus being reached. I think it is, but I think it's a historic moment for a political reason as well. Hopefully we will end the discussion about whether or not Republicans are Neanderthal and only want to hang them high, and Democrats are wacko liberals and only want to look at the causes. Those days
Wacko
are gone.
liberals.
Evidence of that, the Democratic senator from Delaware
Is the criminal.
and the Republican conservative senator from Utah are united in a Biden-Hatch crime bill that does all the things that I just said. So as one of my relatives who remain nameless would say, God willing, and the creek not rising, hopefully we'll end this kind of debate and decide how we're going to deal with the problem from here on. I reserve the balance of my time.
Senator reserves the balance of his time. Senator has 21 minutes remaining. Who yields time?
President, I yield myself an
Dalloway.
additional minute. I would like to put into the record the endorsement letters from the 6 major police organizations, the Fraternal Order of Police, the National Association of Police Organizations, the International Brotherhood of Police Officers.
I've added the rest of the video in the comment section, but once you look back with eyes to see on Mr. Biden, one hopes that he gets the same fate that he laid out for so many others, him and his son.